Hello. Welcome to my build guide for cast when stunned. Yes, cast when stunned. So apparently GGG decided to really buff this support gem. It went from a 69% chance to trigger to 89, and the trigger rate, the cooldown, went from 0.25 to 0.1. You don't see it here. It's not updated in POB yet, but it's in the patch notes. So I decided, because I like to do dumb shit, that I wanted to make a build out of this, right? This is obviously a build concept. This isn't made yet in the video game because, we don't have the new gems and stuff, but this is the kind of stuff that makes me want to really play the video game. First of all, full disclosure, this is not a bossing POB character, right? You want as many enemies to hit you as possible to generate up to 10 triggers per second, right? If you only have one enemy, you're not going to do Maven, you're not going to do Cirrus, you're not going to do Ubers with this. This is not what it is. It is good, however, for when you get swarmed. Imagine the new Breach, the new Abyss, Blight, Delirium, all that stuff, right? Where you're getting hit like 1,000 times. Beautiful, but not a boss killer. Again, we're going to go in the configs here to make sure that we're not doing anything illegal. I have stationary here, 3 seconds. It's like average. You can go up to 5 for a bit more physical damage reduction, but that's not too important. Endurance charges, we get those because we get hit. Adrenaline is very good because we have a beautiful node right here. Gain adrenaline when you're stunned. And we're stunned literally all the time, so that's nice. Go back here. Convergence, yes, because we are Elementalist. Lightning override here. Shock, we get our shock because we are Elementalist, and we always shock here. And I think our shock rate is 30, 35. And this is set to Guardians, even though we're not really going to do this for Guardians. But for the damage purposes, we always set this at Guardians. And I think that's it. Exposure, lightning. We have Innervate on our biggest skill, which is Orb of Storms. Even though you don't activate that, it's not that big a deal. It's about 10%. So, and the rest is clean. So very, very good. Before we go into items and everything, I want to show you guys how this works to begin with, right? You want to get stunned a lot. And how you do that as a life-based character is with this thing right here. Stun threshold is based off of your energy shield instead of your life. So if you go to the calculations tab here in the defense, our stun threshold is 96, which is awful. That means like literally any hit from a white mob in tier 1 maps is going to stun us. Just as an example, if you go back to the tree here, remove that, we have 5,800 stun threshold, which is a 31%-ish chance to be stunned. And that's bad. We want to get stunned as much as possible. Put this back on. So this is good, right? That's how we get stunned all the time. And also we recover by using this notable right here, 5% whenever we get stunned. And there's a new jewel. That's why there's an empty jewel slot here for recovery, right? They announced a new jewel. Whenever you get stunned, it's like 55% of the damage done to you by the stun is recovered over 1 second or something. It's crazy. Really, really good. So we're going to abuse that to be able to sustain ourselves. And we want to be as tanky as possible, because realistically, you're just going to flame dash in and then sit there, right? So recovery is nice, but also having defenses is also very good. Hence the 70k armor, 90 all res, and 80 chaos res, right? I wanted this to be as smooth as possible, just to sit there and be afraid of basically nothing while we recover our life, while we get stunned, and we get adrenaline. So that is kind of the basic of how it works. Item-wise, again, I'm going to be playing in a private league. This is not a starter. Also, to be clear, this is not a starter. Please play this as like a second or third build. Okay, don't do this. Don't do it. Okay, this is a concept build that seems interesting, but please, for the love of God, don't please start this. Nothing here is very expensive. Again, most of my POBs are never going to have something that's like mirror worthy. Singularity is kind of our best in slot. I'm sure you can like craft something much better, but for the price and the rarity of this, it's gonna be very, very helpful for a long time. We want max res. Okay, we want max res. So Saphals and a Brass Dome. This is Copium. Again, not League Starter, right? I want a +5 Brass Dome. It's not mandatory, but there's just so much good defenses on this. Like you're immune, quote unquote, to crits, 5 max res, and just a shit ton of armor. Beautiful. I love this. Maybe I'll get it in a week or something in a private league. I don't know. But this is going to cost you a penny, like a pretty penny for a +5. But realistically, this is like your end game like upgrade for defenses, right? But like a +3 instead of a +5 would do just fine. I want on my rares, I want a little bit of just life res, some life regen would also be very, very good. We definitely need some non-channeling here, like mana cost, because if we're triggering up to 10 times a second, you have to pay the cost of all of those mana-wise. We'll check that in a second. But we definitely need to have the minus... it goes up to -7. I chose a -6, realistically. And it's going to be good. We'll look at that in a little second here. There's a bit of armor, res. You don't even need the cooldown recovery rate here. Like, I put it, but realistically, at like 0.1 by default, it's already 10. I'm not even sure if we get a new breakpoint with the 11 here. Right? Instead of like 10 per second, it might be 11 per second. That's the goal with this this craft here, but it might not be quite enough to get that. We'll see. Life, chaos res, lightning damage, chaos res. We have a single stat Watcher's Eye. Again, this is not mandatory by any means. It just gives us about 13, not even, gives us 8% more damage, which is nice, but also it's not required for you to play this this build. I have a Thread of Hope. It's not super great, to be honest, but it's something. It saves us a few skill points. We definitely want Elemental Overload. I never used this node before, but like since we are using conductivity, that is the only skill we actually use. We just cast a curse and then everything else explodes around us automatically. It seemed kind of nice to have shatter for enemies. Like their bodies are destroyed and they can't regen energy shield and they reduce life regen. It just seemed good for a singular point. Got that. Overload. I saved a point here because we don't need this one, but we do need these two to reduce the mana cost. But again, this is not mandatory. You can just like use your 3 skill points here in the meantime before you get a Thread of Hope. Good. And that's pretty much it. And the empty socket here again is for the newest jewel that's going to be added in the game today, actually. So hopefully it's not too rare. I want to add that in here, and it will really cement our recovery for this build. Granite Flask, I use it Zeres because it gives us some leech, right? Some leech while we're just kind of sitting there. I have nothing else, I think, to use. You do not want evasion. Don't get a Jade Flask. You want to get hit as much as possible. Hello, cat. As much as possible, so you don't want any evasion. Just like raw armor and elemental resistances is what you want. That pretty much sums it up for the items here. In terms of, let's get at the tree real quick. We want spell damage. We're going lightning. All of my cast when stun setups, all 4 of them are all lightning based. So we're getting generic spell, elemental, and lightning damage nodes. So we get that here. We get some regen too because we're running Righteous Fire. With that much fire res, it's actually really easy to run Righteous Fire, which is a kind of a big increase in damage. 40%. Love that. Some regen, Iron Will for a bit more damage. We definitely need this, as I said earlier. This is kind of the core concept of the build. Without this, you don't get stunned. Overload, also very important. It's a 40% multi for all of our casts when stunned setups. We need these 2 for reduced mana cost, and these 2. We also have a bit of it on Singularity. All of that combined will help us to actually sustain our mana. This cluster here is very good. It gives us recovery whenever we're stunned, and adrenaline. Adrenaline is a very good buff. It's damage, it's also movement speed, but we don't actually use that because we're going to get stunned all the time, and we're going to stay in place. But it's also physical damage reduction. It's a really, really, really good buff. It'll be on all the time. We'll just kind of sit there and we get stunned nonstop. We have used, again, this +1 all max elemental res because it's fantastic. That's how we get to 90. Bunch of life, generic elemental stuff here, +50 life. I'm going to put the new unique jewel here. Pretty much it. Always get these clusters down here when you can. It's just so much res. This is how we get endurance charges. When we're hit, we're going to get hit a lot. So it seemed pretty fair to have this. And that's pretty much it for the skill tree here. Now to the meat. We're going to go to our setups here. So very important, two things. One, we're using overload on all of our 4 setups here. That means we can't use controlled destruction realistically, right? Because or else we're going to have like a 1 point something crit chance, and that's not enough to realistically just keep overload up all the time. So we have our wave here. Wave does decent damage, right? This is one, it doesn't seem impressive here, but this is only 1 cast. It's up to 10 times or 11 times per second. So you can see how this would scale up very fast. It also applies exposure for us. We can have it on gloves too, but that's okay. Decent damage, very cool. This times 10. It also costs us 7 mana per second. We have to keep that in mind. Ball lightning, also 7 per second. Ball lightning is only to hit like 3 or 4 times a second. This isn't also very impressive, but all of these balls hit the same target up to 3 to 4 times. Again, like times 3 times 4, and then another times 10 per second. So this could be realistically like another million damage. Right, with slower projectiles is very important. You can also remove slower projectiles and put in Calling Strike if you want to. It's an option to have, free access to Calling Strike. Now we have Arc, which is 225, again times 10, well up to times 10 or times 11, another 2 million damage here. This one is 0 mana cost, which is nice because we use Inspiration. And last but not least, we have our Orb, which is our 6 link, right? This doesn't look very impressive here, but how Orb of Storm works is that it can be hit up to 29 times before dissipating, right? So if we read the little line here, it strikes every 2.55 seconds, which is awful, but also when we use a lightning skill near the orb. And we're going to use a lot of lightning skills near the orb because we have Wave, Ball Lightning, and Arc. And all of these, when they're cast, are going to trigger orb. So this bad boy here at 150k is going to be triggered not only when we cast it, but like when we cast everything else around it. So again, the 150k doesn't look very impressive, but it's multiplied by, 10, 20, sometimes 30 when you're swarmed. So it's actually like a big number. You just don't really see it in PoB right here. None of these use Awaken gems or level 21. You would get obviously more damage with level 21 on everything, and with Awakened added lightning damage. I think I use it on every single one of my setups. Well, minus Wave, I guess Arc and Orb are the biggest damage dealers, and if you have Awakened version for both of those, that would be pretty nice. So our total mana cost is 0,077. Is that correct? Yes, seems to be correct. So that is 14 mana per second. Well, not per second, but per cast. Multiply that by 10, right? Up to 10 or 11. That'd be 140, 150, right? Mana cost per second at most. We have Clarity here, which is 167 per second. So we're good on that end, all right? It's very important to make sure that you, at best, you can actually sustain all of that mana cost. So it's 140, 150, or above that. Nice. For our other slots here, we don't have that much, leeway. I have only 2 4 links left. We self-cast Conductivity. You can have that self-cast in a cast when stunned, but we get more effectiveness when we self-cast it, which is kind of nice. 27%, and it's our only button, to be honest. We only have Flame Dash. I like to enable Vol Molten Shell. Obviously, you can't trigger that by yourself. You can left-click Molten Shell, and you activate Righteous Fire once per map. So realistically, like the amount of buttons pressed is very, very low in a build like this. Connectivity, Flame Dash, Vol Molten Shell. I tried to mess around with Sigil of Power. I actually forgot this existed in the game, right? It provides you a buff for damage, and enemies deal less damage when, you're in the circle at max stages. It felt a little wonky, and realistically, for our last gem slot, Righteous Fire just seemed to be so much better, so I just kind of dropped the whole concept, but it was interesting to mess around with. And our last 4 link is going to be our auras, which is Determination and Wrath. And then we have our life-based one, which is Arrogance and Clarity. All in that combined, we have a 90 all res, elemental res, and 80 chaos res, at least 70k armor. We have enough regen here with our sustain from both the node and the new jewel coming out. All in all, it seems pretty good. It's difficult to estimate all the DPS that we're gonna do, but realistically, like this could be like at most at 10 times a second. This is almost 2 million. This is hard to estimate because it's all of these is 3 to 4 times a second each times 10. So maybe another million here. Arc times 10 is over 2 million. Orb here times like 20 or something. 2, 3, 3.5 million. Like who knows? Who knows, right? It looks really fun. This type of build really gets my brain going, and it looks super fun to play. Easy to get together, get going. Again, the only thing expensive here is going to be +5 brass dome. Again, realistically, you'll be at like 88 all res with a +3 instead of a +5. So it's fine. It doesn't really matter. It'll be like your biggest upgrade if you really want to invest into this character, and the rest is hot trash. So that is a-okay. I didn't even bother with a helmet enchant because it doesn't really matter all that much, to be honest. You can, I'm going to mess around with these links here. I'm not super sold on any of these. Maybe having chain might feel better for like better clear. This is experimental technology, right? This is definitely a work in progress. I'll update the POB as we go. I'll play this, not as a starter again. I'm going to play this maybe as a second or third character. It seems interesting enough. And I'll let you guys know how it feels. And again, it's not a boss killer. Don't do this if you want to do bosses in Maven and stuff. That's you're gonna set up yourself for a very, very bad time. I'm gonna be playing Breach, Abyss, and Delirium mostly because I like that content, and this seems very good for that content. I think that about wraps it up here. We've checked that the gems, our items, configuration is not illegal. Yeah, it seems very, very fun. I'm glad that they sometimes like insert either a new gem or a new interaction that's like a little wacky, right? And this looks really, really fun. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of highlights about cast when stunned during this league. So this is my version of it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, consider subscribing. I have a lot of videos like this lined up for the future. So happy league launch. See you soon.